going to talk about today is we're going to learn about spread, okay? And in the previous notes, we talked about center and shape, what we did on Wednesday. And shape, center, and spread are the three things, Boris, that you need to make sure you know when you're describing a distribution. So if I ever ask you to describe a distribution, what I'm looking for is, in fact, the shape, the center, and what we're going to talk about today, which is the spread. So what exactly is spread? We already know what center is, we know what shape is, but what is spread? So when I say the word spread, what do you guys think of? Cream cheese? Butter? Mathematically, if I say spread, it has to do with a number, I agree. How far apart they are. Someone said if the data is how far it's stretched out. I kind of like that definition from this morning. If we think about our dot plot that we're creating of the NFL salaries, it's pretty stretched out if we look at the outliers on the board maybe back here. So that's really what spread is. It's a measure of how spread out or stretched out the data is, okay? And there are several measures of spread we're going to talk about today. Some are more important than others. Often we use the IQR, which you should have learned about in your summer assignment, interquartile range. We'll talk about that more specifically today. And then we're also going to talk about standard deviation. Those are the two most popular that we're going to talk about today. Real quick, anybody absent last class that wants to make sure they sign up for the Remind app? I'm just going to really quick remind us, if you haven't done so already, if you want messages, you're going to text to this number. I think it's 810-10. Thank you. And then you're going to text the message at Mrs. Macker. So we did this yesterday, but I know that Maria was out, so if it's something you want to sign up for, or if you're watching the recording and you want to sign up for the announcements. Did you get my message, 6 o'clock Wednesday? Did you get the text message I sent you that said your homework was? Okay, perfect. You didn't get it? If you did not get it, you should probably sign up again, because I sent out a message on Wednesday. Okay, so if you did not get the text message, try again. I'll pause for just a second. So sign up for the text messages. Hopefully you just got one, so we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and start. I don't even write this one down because range is something we so very rarely use. It is the least effective. I'm going to turn this down. Maybe that'll help with the heat too, okay? It's the least effective descriptor of spread. And can someone maybe tell me or give me an example of why it might not be a good descriptor of spread? Katie? Perfect. If we talk about spread in terms of range, or we talk about range, it is the maximum minus the minimum, correct? The two values. It's a number. It's one number. Never give me range as 25 to 35. Well, that range would be 10. Okay, so range is a number, but it doesn't really, all it is the width of the data. And if we have outliers, then we don't really know where most of the data is falling. It's not really, if we have all of the data crunched up over here, and then we have where Maddie is sitting way far over there, we have an outlier, the spread, that range value doesn't really tell me that, does it? So it doesn't give us a good overall picture. So that's why range is okay in some places, and we'll look at an example today where it would be okay, but it's really not that effective. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you what it is, but it's really not an effective picture-giving type of spread. The 5-number summary helps us find what's called the IQR, or the interquartile range, and so it is the most effective. Yeah, this is something that if you don't know, I would write down. If you don't know what the 5-number summary is, okay? The 5-number summary includes, and you should always write them in order, okay? It does go minimum, quartile 1, median, which sometimes we refer to as quartile 2, but more often than not, we'll call it a median. Then we have quartile 3 and the maximum. If you list those 5 numbers in order, we are to assume that the second one will always be quartile 1. The last one will always be the maximum. So it is going to be important that you put them in order. Okay? A box and whisker plot is the graphical display that uses the 5-number summary. And we're going to use our calculators today to I'm going to show you how the calculator will produce a 5-number summary. It will also produce a box and whisker plot, which is really nice for us to use. Okay? So let's be a little bit more specific about the quartiles and what information is provided with them. With the quartiles, this is kind of important. So rather than write all of this, I might write it this way. Under quartile 1, 25% of the data is below quartile 1. What percentage would be associated with the median? 50. It's the middle, right? So 50% of the data is below the median. What percentage of the data is below the third quartile? 75%. And then what percentage would be below the maximum? 100%, right? So these 3 percentages are actually kind of important. And we're going to use those percentages next week when we look at what are called cumulative frequency distributions, or OJIs. But we'll get to those next week. But it is important that you associate those percentages along with those statistics. Okay? So we know that. That's not any information we're not aware of already, right? We're good. So what I'd like to do, if I remember correctly, this was one that shouldn't have been included. I'd like to go ahead and remember to put, if you already have this data in, this is the same exact data set we used last class. So if you still have it in list 1, great. If not, grab a calculator, make sure that you put this into list 1. Remind ourselves how to enter it. I believe the actual median was 78. Okay, but just make sure you have that data entered. Who remembers the keystrokes? Where do I go to enter it? Stat, edit. Very good. So we're going to go to stat, edit, and make sure that this data is in list 1. We're going to use this data set again throughout the entire class period, so it's important that you have it there. How do I find where the median is? Or if I want the entire 5-number summary, where would it be? Calc 1var stats, good. You remember, perfect. But if I do calc 1var stats, it doesn't show up immediately. I've got to do what? Scroll down, arrow down. So we also know that the middle is here. This would be quartile 1 because it's halfway between the lower end of the data. It should be 69.5. Is it according to your calculator? Good. And if we look at quartile 3, it's going to be looking at the upper half of the information, the data, and it's going to be the average between 84 and 91, and you get a what, 87.5? That should be what the calculator gives you as well. So we have quartile 1, median, quartile 3, and we have our min and our max. Could you produce a box plot? Sure. We could do it by hand. You should know what it looks like. It should look, let's see if I have one somewhere, something like this, okay? But what I want us to do is I want us to do it on the calculator. So let me show you how to do that. We're going to go to our y equals first and make sure that you have nothing entered in any of the equations. So we're going to go to y equals and just make sure that it's cleared out. Make sure you have it. Do you have your, is this even on? Do you have your data in there? Go to stat. Edit. You got it. Is that the same data set? Okay, perfect. Then just go to y equals now, make sure nothing's in there. Okay, if once you cleared out your y equals, you're going to go to stat plot. Stat plot is found by going to second y equals. And you're going to turn it on by hitting enter. And then you'll have a screen that comes up. I wish I could display this up here, but I don't have that emulator yet. Hopefully it's coming next week. So go ahead and hit enter. and then you're going to turn it on. You're also going to choose the type. So you're going to, once it's on, you're going to choose the type to be a box plot. Please choose the one that has the outliers. The second one. So you're going to go to stat plot, which is second y equals, and enter, turn it on, and then the type is going to be the one with the dots. Okay? Yes, sir.
This one or that?
It's the one with the dots. The one that has the outliers that are showing. Okay? I believe it's the first one. Is that correct? The first of the two? Okay. So that's the one I want you to pick. So the type is going to be, I believe it looks like this. Double check me. Has the outliers on the left? Is that right? Oh, on the other side? Oh. All right. So it has the outliers like that. That's the one I want you to pick. Okay? It should also be, I believe it says list, X list. You should have it. Where do we put the numbers? We put it in L1, didn't we? Okay? And sometimes you can change that because sometimes we will graph things in different lists. But for now, we're going to just graph the ones we put in list 1. Thank you. Okay? And then next, we're going to actually graph it. So to graph it, you're going to zoom stat. So find the zoom button up across the very, very top. And I believe it's option 9. Okay, so zoom 9 is the same thing as zoom stat, and it should show up. Okay, you should see your box plot, which is kind of cool, especially if you have a colored one. It kind of comes up in different colors if you're fancy. Miss Whittington, go ahead and go. Anything you miss, we'll catch up later. The second thing is, wouldn't it be nice if the 5-number summary showed up here? It actually does. I can show you how to do that. To find the 5-number summary after you graph, all you have to hit is the trace key. So once it's graphed, if you hit trace, notice it pops up on the minimum value. Do you see that? And then if you hit the arrow to the right, it will go over all the parts of the 5-number summary. It'll tell you the minimum, quartile 1, the median, quartile 3, and the maximum. So you can find it there if you want. Okay, so trace from the graph and then arrow over, and it will find those, it'll display those numbers for you. Okay? Any questions about box plots and how to graph them on the calculator? I want you, being able to graph them by hand is something we did back in Algebra 1. Okay, that's kind of below our level. So you know how to do it. Use your calculator to do it quickly. That's fine with me. I'm more interested, do you understand how to use it and what do you do? You had both of them on. You had plot 1 and plot 2 on. Okay, good to go so far. Keep your calculators out because we're going to use those in just a second some more. So, at this point, we already have done this where we divided it into quarters and we've done that, so we're good. These are all wrong because I changed the numbers, so. We've already done that. And there's our graph. We've done that too. Okay? So let's jump to the interquartile range. The interquartile range is a simple calculation, simply much like the actual range, but instead of the maximum minus the minimum, it's quartile 3 minus quartile 1. This is a much better measure of spread than the range would be. Can someone tell me why? You already told me why the range is bad. Because if there's outliers present, it doesn't explain that. Why would IQR be a better picture? Tell me your name again. Matt. Okay. Matthew, sorry. It's the middle 50%. So I know that at least that 50% of the data will be between these two numbers. So it gives me a good picture. Actually, if you look at your box plot that you graphed, how does the IQR relate to the box plot? It's the box. The IQR is the length of the box. So the bigger the box you have, the bigger IQR, the more spread out it is. Smaller box, smaller spread. So if you're comparing to if you have two box plots, kind of like the creamy peanut butter and the crunchy peanut butter, you should be able to say that one is more spread out than the other by just a visual picture. Okay? Morning. All right, so this is actually wrong because it's 87.5 minus 69.5, and I believe the answer was 18. Is that correct? Double check me. Is that what you guys got? Quartile 3 is 87.5. Quartile 1 is 69.5. When you subtract them, you get 18. Okay, good. Oh, I'm not moving on because we're staying on this right now. I want us to check, because you guys have a quiz next class, okay? And I'm going to tell you what's on it, or at least partially what's on it. One of them is you're going to have to make a box plot, okay? So we know how to do that now. 2, you're going to have to perform an outlier test. And you guys had to do that on your summer assignment that you turned in, but we're going to go through it again today just to make sure, okay? So we're going to actually go ahead and use this data set. I don't think they're outliers. Actually, I know there are not outliers. How do I know? They didn't show up on the box plot. If an outlier is present, and because didn't we pick the type to show the outliers if they were there? We picked that type. Because we picked that type, if they were present, we would know. So I already know there aren't. Let's prove it. So let's conduct an outlier test. Okay? So an outlier test is found by finding what are called the fences. There's a lower fence and there's an upper fence. And we're going to these are the formulas. You're going to take your IQR, you're going to multiply it by 1.5, and then you're either going to add it to your third quartile to get your upper fence, or you're going to subtract it from quartile 1 and get your lower fence. Sometimes they're boundaries, but I most likely call them fences. So that's, if you put boundaries, I will accept it. Yeah, it's totally fine. So let's figure out if we can do that. Okay? I'm going to stand up. Will that help you get awake? You sure? All right. I don't want you sleeping through it. So what was our IQR that we found? 18. So let's go ahead through the process and make sure we know how to find the fences. So we're going to take our quartile 1, which, remind me what it was. It was a 69.5, right? So we're going to take 69.5, and we're going to subtract 1.5 times 18. We're going to take the upper fence of 87.5, and we're going to add 1.5 times 18. So you guys have the calculators. You tell me what the two fences are. The good news is your graphing calculators do order of operations automatically, so if you just typed it in, it should be okay. We should get like 42.5 maybe? Is that right? So I have 42.5 as my lower fence, and 114.5 as well as my lower fence. Sometimes we write it like this. On a quiz or a test, if I ever ask you to perform the outlier test, I am looking for the calculation and the work. Okay, so I want you to show me this formula that you know what you're doing. Don't just give me this. Okay, show me your process. And I haven't finished the outlier test yet because all I did was find the fences. Now so I've done the calculations, now I have to make a decision. Yes or no, and why? Did I make a mistake? Question? 18 is the IQR. It was Q3 minus Q1. We found it back here. Hang on. It's 87.5 minus 69.5. Okay? It's the IQR. We found it somewhere. Right here. In a quartile range. We found it to be 18. Good question. Anything else? Yes, ma'am. No. That's a great question. No. Zachary. Yes. Yes. You subtract or add. But remember, you subtract it from. If you have a graphing calculator, you can type it in all at once. It'll do it for you. Okay? Because it does order of operations automatically. Someone else have a question? Yes. You don't have to. I'm just showing you that it can be written either way. Okay? So I have a partial answer here. You will not get a full, complete answer as of yet. What two things do I still have left to say? Yes or no, there's outliers, and why. Okay? You're looking to see if there's an outlier. This is what if I say perform an outlier test, this is what we're doing. Okay? So we're going to say yes or no, there are outliers, and we're going to say no. Okay? We say no, there are not outliers, because we already knew there wasn't because the graph said no, right? So there are no outliers. Tell me why. Because, okay, so the maximum of 99 falls into this interval, and the minimum of, I don't know what the minimum was, 64, also lies in the interval. Nothing lies outside of our fences. Our entire data set falls within the interval, falls between the fences. So there's no outliers. If we had someone that scored 120 on the test, let's say there was extra credit, that would be an outlier. Remember the poor guy who came in and scored a 10 because he came late to the class, but they made him take it anyway from on Wednesday? That 10 would be an outlier because it's lower than the lower fence. So when you're talking about your reasoning and why, you either say yes, because one's below the lower fence or one's above the upper fence, or there's no outliers because all the data is inside of the interval. Okay? Okay? Any questions about that? Zachary? Shh. Exactly. So Zachary, listen to it this way. If we had a number above, that'd be an outlier. If we had a number below, it'd be an outlier. But everything's inside, so we're okay. If I said perform an outlier test, you guys got it now? 2 thumbs up. Good, because you're going to have to do that next week. Okay? All right. We already know about modified box plots. Let's talk about the last couple of measures of spread. Anybody who takes IB Bio has talked about variance and standard deviation. Okay? Anybody in here taking any IB math classes like HL or anything in addition to this one? Last year I had a couple HL people that took statistics as an elective. I didn't know. Okay. No one here. But any IB Bio people? Just a couple? All right. So your IB Bio formula will be different because International Baccalaureate and also the state of Virginia, by the way, treats data sets as what we call populations, where AP people treat them as samples. So if you're talking in the IB or a math like algebra SOL or anything like that, you'll divide by simply n. But if you're an AP, which is us, you'll be dividing by n minus 1. All that difference is whether you treat it as a sample versus treat it as a population. Don't worry too much about that. Just know that that's our formula. Byron, why are you so tired? Because what? because you have a long weekend coming up? Huh? A long day. Sorry, I'm actually partially deaf. Did you know that? Yeah, I had shingles on my eardrum about 5 years ago, and I actually can't hear very well. So that's just my fault. I apologize, especially with the fan in the back, and it's bad for me. Got to speak up. This little bar above the X, by the way, is supposed to go with it. That does mean the mean. It just, in my editing skills, because I got no skills at all, it ended up way up there. So sorry about that. But that's supposed to be the mean, okay? So let's talk about this formula and what it means. I cracked myself up. Not really. What is that E-looking thing again? Sigma, which represents the sum. So we're going to be summing something, adding things together. We're going to be taking the mean and subtracting it from this xi, by the way, just means every data point. So like each of the test scores, each one individually. We're going to subtract the mean from it, then we're going to square it, then we're going to sum those squares, then we're going to divide it by the, what is n? The number of whatever we had. I think we had 9 test scores, is that right? So this would be, we divide by 8, because one less than that. So the standard deviation is just simply the square root of the variance. So if I ever asked you, you probably have heard standard deviation, okay? Well, I know you have because you took Algebra 2. And the normal distribution, there's so many standard deviations away from the mean. So I know you've heard of it. But if we took the square root of this, now we have the standard deviation, okay? I'm going to ask you on your quiz next class to calculate a standard deviation by hand one time. Only one time. After you prove to me you can do it, I'll never ask you to do it by hand again, ever. Because your calculator does it for you. Is someone behind me? I thought there was someone behind me. I just got this like weird feeling. That's so strange. Okay? So your calculator does it for you, but I just want to make sure that you understand the meaning behind it and how to calculate it. So what I'd like us to do is take the data set that we just had, and I want us to calculate the standard deviation. So I'm going to borrow Maria's calculator, and I'm going to write down all of the values. So you should do this as well, because this is something I'm going to ask you to do, okay? So you should do it too. So we're going to, and by the way, I will give you a chart much like this on your quiz, so you can see the steps. I won't tell you to sum it, though, because I feel like that's telling you what to do, okay? But I'll give you the little table, because I want you to use it. All right, so in our table, go ahead and put these values in. Thank you, Maria. Now, if you notice in the formula that I gave you, I told you in the formula that we were subtracting the mean. But if you look at the chart, it says the mean minus the value. So the order in which I subtracted is a little different. Does that matter? Does it matter the order that you subtract the numbers? Not here. Tell me why it wouldn't matter here whether I did the mean minus the value or the value minus the mean. Why doesn't it matter, Samantha? Because I'm going to square it anyway. When I square a negative number, don't I get a positive? So it doesn't really matter the order that you subtract them, okay? So don't worry too much about that. I won't be picky about that, okay? What was the mean again? Someone do one of our stats for me and tell me what it was. 70. I heard 78 and 79. Which one is it? It's 78? Okay. Want to know for sure. Okay. That's not the median. I want the mean. Okay. I believe so. You can always double check by going to stat. That's what I'm saying. I think the median was 78. I think the mean is 79. I want the mean, right? Double check me now. I think the median was 78, but the mean was 79, right? Double check. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. You ready? We're going to take 64 minus 79, and I get negative 15. I'm going to take 69 minus 79, and I get negative 10. And you're going to subtract the mean of 79 from each of those initial test scores. Surely there's an easier way that the calculator can help us. Of course there is. Let me tell you how to populate this list pretty quickly, okay? Do me a favor, go to Stat, go to Edit, and go over to List 2. Stat Edit, go up to so where List 2 is dark, just like that. Perfect. Go up to where List 2 is darkened. So go up to where List 2 is darkened. It's walking around. So go to Stat Edit, and then arrow up to List 2. Good, good. Just making sure. Double check in, perfect. Okay. So once your List 2 is highlighted and it looks like it is, you're going to tell the calculator to take List 1 and subtract 79 from each of those numbers. But you have to do it up at the top. So remember how to put List 1, so you're going to say second one minus 79. And hit Enter, and the whole column will populate for you automatically. Does it? So you want to go over here and up to where List 2 is highlighted. Then you're going to say List 1 minus 79 and hit Enter. And it does it for you, okay? So it'll populate the whole list for you, and we should get these numbers. Did you get those? Hopefully that's what you got. All right. So now what do I do with those numbers? According to the formula, after I subtracted them, I do what with each of those values? Square them. So negative 15 squared. Okay? Negative 10 squared. Oh, surely, Miss Mackert, there's an easy way to populate this table as well. Of course there is. Go over to List 3. Go up to where it's highlighted. And then tell it to take every number in List 2 and square it. You do not have to put the parentheses. I just did it because I think the 2's are weird looking, subscript and superscript, so just tell it to square List 2. And hit Enter, and it should populate that field for you. I would love that. Not required, though. If you have this here, I think that's the right thing to do. So yes. Okay? So you are going to get these numbers here. And we squared all of our values. Now I want to find the sum of them. Because isn't that what the sigma is in the formula? We're summing those values. So we're going to add them all up. I'm going to take all these values and I'm going to add them. If you want to know a calculator shortcut for adding all the values, I can tell you where that is, or you can do it by hand. It's totally up to you. But if you're interested, if you go to Second List, which I believe is Second Stat, and you arrow over to Math, I believe option 5 is Sum. You need to make sure that you're out of the table first, though. So if you did this from the table, it's not going to work. So quit that and then don't be in the table and then go to these calculator strokes. And tell it that you want to, which list are we in that we want to sum? List 3, I believe. It's the third column over. So we're going to sum list 3. And hit enter and it'll give you the answer. Second list, arrow over to math, sum. But you can't do it while you're still working in the table, okay? Because if you do that, it'll mess you up. Or you can just do it by hand. There's only 9 numbers. It ain't that hard. I don't care. It's not going to take that long to do it by hand. I think you get 986. Is that correct? Okay. So we have a sum of 986. Am I done? Look at your formula. What do I have left to do? Divide by n minus 1. So I'm going to take my sum and I'm going to divide it by, in our case, 9 minus 1 because we had 9 test scores. So what is 986 divided by 8? 123.25. Oops, 123.25. What number is that again? What is that? The variance. If I'm asking you for the standard deviation, which I will ask you for, so this is the variance. I want the standard deviation, so the standard deviation is the square root of 123.25, which is 11.1. Is it exactly? What is it? And then we'll just round it. 11.1, okay? All right. N minus 1. The N, there were 9 test scores that we used. If I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? So this number here just corresponds to the total number of numbers. Okay? Good questions. This is a measure of spread. 11.1 means that it's spread out that far. Okay? If they were normally distributed, if you remember this from last year, 11.1 above the middle, 11.1 below the middle, has a certain percentage of the data. We'll get to that in December. Could you find the standard deviation by hand if I asked you? No. You're going to study this, though, and you're going to be prepared for next week. Is there a way to check it on the calculator to make sure I did it right and got the right answer? Yeah. If I go to Stat Calc 1 bar stats again, do that for me real quick. I'm going to show you where the 11.1 shows up. There are 2 values in here that are the standard deviation. One of them represents the sample standard deviation, and the other represents the population. So if you're an IB bio, you're going to use the sigma x. In statistics, we're going to use the SX for sample standard deviation. Okay? So it's just a way for you to check your answer to make sure you got it right. Are we good? So this is, I would write star it in your notes. This is on your quiz. I'll only ask you to do it once, ever. And then from there on out, you can just use the SX on your calculator. Okay? Perfect. All right. We're going to kind of change gears for a little bit. And I wanted to look at an actual practice exam question. Actually, not practice, an actual exam question. Okay? I guys told you that I graded exams last year, right? Actually, it was this summer. This is a question. This is question number 1 from last year, or from 2015, this year's, administration of the AP exam. This is question 1. So we're going to look at it. Okay? While I'm handing these out to you, and I will do my best to hole punch these from now on. I apologize. Is it bothering you? Are you cold? You're cold? Okay, hang on. Okay, good. It's fine. I'm sweating like a pig, but it's okay. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's fine. If I pass out in front, throw some water on my face. All right. Let me talk. I've been recording the whole time. Fun. Let me talk a little bit about the exam, okay, just so you have some background. You will have an AP, an end of year course exam that is possible, allows you to possibly get credit for college credit for this course, okay? It happens in May for my sophomore table. It's the same day as COPO. So COPO people, if you're a sophomore and you're in COPO, you have 2 exams the same day. I make you pancakes, I promise. Okay, I make everybody pancakes on AP day, but sophomores that are in COPO, you have 2 AP exams the same day. It's never happened before. I'm sorry. That's all I can say. Anyway, let's talk about the statistics exam, okay? The statistics exam is comprised of 2 main parts. There is 50% of the exam is multiple choice, and you have an hour and a half to complete 45 multiple choice questions. So about 2 minutes a question, okay? You also have about an hour and a half to complete 6 free response questions, and I typically call them FRQs, free response question, okay? There are 6 of them. The 6th one, the last one, actually is a little bit more involved and requires a little bit more work. So they require they don't say require, but they say you should spend about 25 minutes on that one alone. It's called an investigative task. We're not going to worry about that today. Later in the year, we'll talk about what that means. We're starting with question 1, so it's one of the shorter questions. I say shorter, but if you look at the actual length of the question, they're awful wordy, aren't they? I mean, look at Samantha. She can't even look at it. It's so long. I mean, for reals? Okay, it's long. So I'm going to try as we go through here, and we're going to practice these all throughout the year, okay? I just know that this was on last year's exam and it pertains to what we're doing right now, so I thought it was a good time to bring out our first question. You may read that first paragraph, but I tend to think that you should read the question first. So if you jump down to where it says A and B, read the question, look at the graphs, then go back up and read all the other maths. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you need another one. Is that what you're trying to say to me? I can't look at it because you didn't give me one. There you go, sweetie. Yeah. So read it for yourself. I'm going to tell you that there's about approximately, I say approximately, 10 to 12 minutes that you should spend on any one free response question. So and the first one typically goes much faster than some of the later ones. They progressively get a little bit more difficult, sometimes. The first one almost always deals with this current unit, univariate data. I shouldn't say almost always. It more often than not does. There'll be some sort of graph, and you'll have to analyze it more often than not. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to the best of your ability, answer the question, and then we'll see how well we do. Okay? So you got 10 minutes. So the AP does provide scoring guidelines and how the questions are scored. Every free response question is broken down into parts, 2, 3, sometimes 4 parts. This particular question has 2 parts, parts A and B. Sometimes part A will have more than 1 part, the way it's graded, but this is the scoring guidelines break it down for us. And then each of those parts are considered graded with an E, a P, or an I. So do me a favor, in the margin of your paper, go ahead and say part 1, part 2, over here in the margin. I want you to give yourself a score of an E, P, or an I, and I'll explain how to do that in a minute, okay? then we look at our E, P's, and I's and all of our parts, and we together give ourselves a score from 0 to 4. So each question, each FRQ gets a score from 0 to 4. This being our very first attempt at anything, week 1 of school, I don't expect any 4s, okay? I would expect at least some 1s and 2s, though, because I think we've covered a lot of what this question's asking. But let's see how well we do, okay? So on the guidelines, we're just going to go ahead and scroll up. Oops, hang on, question 1. Come back down, my dear. Come back. Oh. We're going to have to go slow. This is cutting into my Friday fun. Okay, come on. I guess I have to go back here and do it. Whatever. Oh, there we go. All right, so the intent of the question is basically to assess the ability, can you compare two distributions? If you look at them, I have 2. When I compare distributions, we're going to be comparing 3 things. What am I comparing? Shape, center, spread. Shape's a little hard to tell with a box plot. So in place of shape, are there any features that we can point out right away? Outliers. So we should discuss the outliers especially. So shape, center, spread. When we are comparing, we're going to use compare words like bigger than, larger than. Don't make changes now. Your answer's done. Greater than's fine. We're going to get to what the answers are. But if you have to use compare words, or maybe they're the same. I don't know. But you're using compare words. Okay? So that's part A. There's a part A solution. Now, if your answer is anywhere near the solution, like, you should be writing the class. Like, I can't even provide the ideal solution sometimes. Okay? These are just, your answers will never look like this. And that's okay. Okay? This is just kind of like the ideal answer if it was out there. The ideal answer for part A says that the median salary is about the same for both. That's comparing. Did you say that for center? Perfect. Woohoo! Okay. Now they did range. Makes me a little uncomfortable. Okay. Some gastrointestinal issues when I see that, but that's all right. Anyone else talk about range? I'm okay with that. It's fine. But the IQR, did anyone talk about the box? An IQR, that's great. It says that it's greater, look at that ER compare word, for corporation A than for corporation B. Did we say that? Rockin' and rollin', right? We have center, we have spread. So what's left is shape. And again, shape's kind of hard. We can't say it's skewed right, skewed left, symmetric, really, with box plots too much. Histograms are more better, or dot plots, or even stem plots are better at that shape. But outliers, you got to talk about the outliers. And which one had outliers? Corporation A had outliers, while B had nothing. Okay? How do we feel about part A? Do you think we did it? I think we nailed it. I hope we did. We'll see. Part B is a little bit more difficult. We haven't really done one like Part B, okay? So we have to make some decisions. Which one do we want and why? So I would be able to make a higher salary at Corporation A. Did you say Corporation A? Then we also got to tell why. The reason why is that the top 3 salaries for Corporation A are bigger than the maximum of Corporation B. That is a comparison of the 2. Something along those lines. So if you said Corporation A, you're halfway there. But you got to say why. Those 2 outliers and the end of the whisker on Corporation A are all above the whisker on Corporation B. They're all bigger than. Did it already say Corporation A? Okay, so it's because you'd make a higher salary. I apologize. Thanks, Byron, for clarifying that for me. All right, for part 2 in question B, it's why would you work at what would happen if you stayed at Corporation A? Well, it's likely you'll never get a raise. Okay, that's the meaning behind that. Okay, so how is it scored? How do I know if I got an E, a P, or an I? How do I score it, Ms. Mackert? Let's look at the actual, let's see if I can do it from here. Perfect. So, for part A, on your margin, where you're going to give yourself an E, a P, or an I on part A, you're going to look at 4 things. A correct comparison of center. The centers are the same. The medians are the same. Check. Spread. One has a larger spread. Larger, compare word. Discussion of the outliers. In order to get an E, you also have to put it in context, meaning you have to have the word salaries in your answer. And that's one thing I can probably say over half of us probably did not do. Pay would be fine. That is a context word. Okay? Pay and salary, I believe, are the same type of thing. I would give you that. But context, I will tell you, AP is always looking for answers in context. If it's something you left out, write yourself a note in the margin. Tell yourself, you forgot context, add it next time. These are your notes, your help, your guiding to help you from now on, okay? You should keep these as we go throughout the year. Make yourself a section in your binder for released exam questions. So when we get to the actual exam, you have notes on what we've done. It's a good thing to do. So, anyone get all 4 parts and got an E? Come on now. That deserves an up top. Let's go. Come on. Let's do it. If you missed one, you forgot context, or you forgot something, if you got 3 out of the 4, you give yourself a P. Okay? If you only did 2, it's an I. Isn't that terrible? Like if you got center and spread, but you forgot to mention outliers and you didn't put it in context, it's an I. You got no credit at all. I'm serious. Now this isn't me. This isn't Mrs. Mackert's decision. This is, the College Board's decision. But they're rough, right? That's serious. Okay, so and it says any mention of shape should be ignored. So if you broke down skewed left or skewed right, we didn't have to pay attention to that at all. Okay. Let's look at Part B. Part B is a little harder to grade, I think. Hang on. Oh gosh, I'm going to trip over my book, someone's book bag there. Let's try it again. Is that your book bag, James? You trying to kill me? It's all right, I don't need my legs. Okay. Here, I'm going to go this way. Part B. Ooh, we got to get going. All right. Part B here. It's essentially correct if, in part 1, you talked about the measure that was identified or described and a comparison that talks about part A, why it's relevant. To me, this is a hard one to grade. Like I would like to look at the notes as to how they would come up with, did I answer that? And then for 3 and 4 for part 2, you'd have to figure out a relevant statistical measure. Which ones are they talking about? So I don't understand really what they're saying here. I'll be honest with you. If I was grading this question or this part of this question, I would have to have some clarification. So if it states, look at this, it says, for example, if the response in part 1 only says, at Corporation A, I have the potential to earn a higher salary, the second part is satisfied, but not the first. Because you didn't use you didn't use 3 out of 10. Does that make sense? So if you said the potential, you got the explanation. But you have to give some sort of measure, some sort of statistic, like those top 3 are larger than you understand what I'm saying? Maybe? So, if you just said that you have a potential to earn a higher salary for part 1, and for part 2 you said, I would never get a raise or something like that, then that would give you 2 out of the 4 components. But guess what? 2 out of 4 gives you, 2 out of the 4 gives you a P. It's not bad. Okay? So give yourself an E, a P, or an I on part B for me. So you should have 2 E's, 2 P's, an E and a P and an I, whatever. PP, whatever, okay? I know, Boris, I'm sorry. Bad jokes, I don't know what to tell you. I'm queen of the bad jokes, by the way. All right, so how do I give myself a score from 0 to 4? If you got 2 E's, EE, you got a 4. I don't expect any 4s here. Okay? If you got an EP, that's a 3. If you got an EI or a PP, you get a 2. And if you got a PI or an IP, you get a 1. If you got an II, it's a 0. Please write your score at the very top and circle it. Did you get a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4? A 2. That's okay. I mean, this is practice, right? So that's why we do this, so you know about 10 minutes and how long it's going to take. You absolutely use your calculator on this practice quiz. If you are absent, make sure that you see me about getting the practice quiz. There is no homework over Labor Day weekend, but you do have a quiz to study for. Okay? So quiz next class.